Coming and welcome to the first installment of the second year of the Biomedical Research Seminar Series at Juniata College, presented by our Health and Justice Department. The seminar series was created last year by Sam Gary and Dr. Siglin to supplement our traditional biology and chemistry seminars with seminars that are more biomedically applicable. Today's speaker is Dr. Travis Hull. He graduated from Juniata in 2009. And he is currently finishing his final year in the MD PhD program at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. His research interests are focused in immunology, and he investigates the repair mechanisms of the heart and kidney following transplantation, specifically the heme oxygenase 1 mediated protection from tissue injury. But today, during his first talk, we'll be talking about his path to becoming an MD PhD, what that trajectory is like, and the benefits of pursuing such a career. It would take me longer than an hour to fully summate the scope of Dr. Hull's accomplishments at Juniata and since then, but I'll try to do just a little bit. While at Juniata, Dr. Hull was a Barry M. Goldwater Scholar, presented his undergraduate research at conferences across the country. He graduated summa cum laude with distinction in biology. Since then, he has been inducted into Alpha Omega Alpha Medical Honor Society and has authored 11 peer-reviewed publications on his research. The recipient of many awards for his research. He's also the chair of membership for the American Physician Scientists Association and also a peer reviewer for the Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Travis Hull.
Thanks, man. Good work. Thanks for the great welcome, Jonathan. I'm really happy to be here, everyone. So as Jonathan said, I graduated just 8 short years ago in 2009. This is my first official time being back to Juniata. I want to thank Jonathan, Sam, Nick, Joanna, and everyone for welcoming me back so warmly and then for putting this together. I've been here a little bit over 12 hours now, and it's been great. Already eaten at Boxer's and Standing Stone, so I hit up the major establishments in Huntington. And have been having a great time. I came here to talk to you guys, and I'm really excited to get to talk to you guys. I want this to be super informal. These talks tend to get a little bit boring, so that's like my greatest fear. This can't be boring. So if it's getting boring, you guys need to let me know and realize full well that that isn't going to offend me at all. My goal is to take what I know, translate it into something that's useful, and then deliver it to you guys in a way that's meaningful, and I hope I'll be able to do that. Just to start, to get an idea of where I should spend most of my time, as Jonathan said, I finished my PhD, which I finished in 2012. I'm working on completing my MD in 2009. At UAB, the way that it works is it's not a streamlined pathway. You complete every aspect of the PhD that a student only getting a PhD completes, and same thing with the medical school. So I have a fairly good understanding of how both of those processes work. I can speak to the PhD, I can speak to the MD, and then obviously the MD PhD. I'd like to know how many of you are interested in each of those respective pathways. So just by a show of hands, who in here wants to get a PhD? So like 3-ish? Okay. How about an MD? So everybody-ish? And how about MD PhD? Raise your hands super high. None of this, put it up there. Good, all right, so there are some people that are interested in MD PhD, which is really exciting to me. There's a couple key things about MD PhD that I hope that I can really stress to you that are important, and then we'll sort of just go from there. Hopefully I can inspire a few additional people in this room to consider the MD PhD pathway, because I'm obviously biased, but I think it's a great pathway. So here's just the outline for the day. I'm giving 2 talks today. The one that you're sitting in today is just talking about program options. You see this? Yeah. But we'll start with a little biography. We'll talk a little bit about some different program options. Tonight around 5:30, I'm going to talk a little bit more about my research. Now, I know everyone's been in those super boring research talks. I'm going to try not to do that. I'm going to try to just make it sort of exciting aspects of science and get you motivated really to be excited to be a physician scientist in your future career. So if any of you guys were thinking about skipping out on that for fear of it being boring, I'm hoping it won't be. And then the important points throughout today, I'm here for you guys. So I have slides. I could care less if I get through all of them. I really just care about answering your questions. So if you have questions all along the way, please bring them up. And then if you find yourself pulling out your phone to Facebook because you're bored, please let me know. We need to change up how this is going. I need to keep you engaged, and this needs to be useful. So does everyone understand that? Okay, so biography. I grew up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I was born in Johnstown, and I went to Forest Hills High School. I don't know if any of you guys come from high schools that play us in football, but football is sort of our thing. We just built a new $40 million school. I haven't seen it yet, but I hear it's pretty nice. I came to Juniata right out of high school. My POE was biology, and importantly, I did research in microbial genetics. So one of the important points that I want to hit home today is I decided to do research because I wanted to have another bullet point on my CV. I in no way, shape, or form was interested in research. Honestly, I came from a farm. I didn't even know what a PhD was. But I started doing research right at the beginning of my sophomore year with an outstanding mentor. So mentors is the second important point that you need to get out of me speaking today, the importance of finding a good mentor who is your advocate, who's in your corner. I found that at the beginning of my sophomore year. Her name was Jennifer Bennett. She's no longer at Juniata. She's at Otterbein College in Ohio. But I put these things on there simply to show you the importance of having an outstanding mentor. These things happened. Sure, I was excited about these and I worked hard to make them happen, but really I didn't know anything about them. Dr. Bennett put them in my corner and said, here are opportunities. All you need to do is take advantage of them. So I presented my research all around the country. I won a couple awards. I won travel awards. We got a first author publication out of it. I did a summer research at Harvard and then got some independent funding. Now, all of these things look great on an application, whether it's to MD, PhD, or MD, PhD. And I'm not putting these things, I put these things on this slide and took them out, put them on, took them out, because I thought, is this coming off as sort of like bragging or being arrogant? I decided to go with them because I wanted you guys to see the level of commitment to this career pathway that's necessary in order to be successful in pursuing an MD, PhD degree. So you need to start early. By the end of your freshman year, you should be starting some research. You shouldn't just be doing research to put it on your CV as a bullet point. You need to be doing research where you can gain some currency. That currency is publications and presentations. So that's very important. Some other things that are really important for any application are leadership. So these are some of the leadership opportunities that I participated in. So there's involvement and then there's leadership. These places are looking for leadership. They don't want to see that you're a member of 13 different clubs. They want to see that you had a leadership position in one or two of them. So keep that in mind. And then shadowing, I think for an MD-centric type of pathway, the number should be around 1,000 hours of shadowing. You definitely want to consider starting a linear relationship with one person. In addition to branching out and seeing different specialties, it's not important at this point that you understand what you want to be for the rest of your life. You'll determine that in medical school. Right now, what you want to do is find another mentor, find a clinical mentor who can write a good letter for you, who knows you. Dr. Hanty actually tried to get me to date his daughter. That was how much he knew me. I shadowed him every Friday starting as a freshman. He's a pathologist down at J.C. Blair. I assume he's still there, but I don't know. And I'm sure if any of you reached out to him, he'd be happy to have you shadow him. I also shadowed a general surgeon in my hometown of Johnstown after he removed colon cancer mass from my grandma. So, and then I took this rural medicine class that I know at least Johanna was saying is still going on and I think is a good opportunity. So get involved, be proactive in your education, be your own advocate, and seek out mentors. If you stop listening now, that is really what I want you to get out of this talk. So after graduating from Juniata in 2009, that's when I moved to Birmingham, Alabama, and started in the MD PhD program. Now, if I was sitting in you guys' seat 8 years ago, and if you would have told me I would have spent 8 years in Birmingham, Alabama, I would have told you were absolutely crazy. So that's another point that I'm trying to make here. Be open to new opportunities. Be open to pushing the box for what's comfortable for you, because I've grown and expanded as a person, as a father, as a professional immensely because I'm living in Birmingham, away from family, out of my comfort zone. So I completed the first 2 years of medical school from 2009 to 2011. In 2011, I took step 1 of the USMLE board exam and started my PhD, which was in the Division of Cardiothoracic Surgery. I had co-mentors, Jim George, who's a PhD in the Division of Cardiothoracic Surgery, and Anupam Agarwal, who is a nephrologist and the Division Director of Nephrology at UAB. Again, mentors. These people were absolutely incredible. They consider me family, and I do the same for them. And the importance of finding a mentor who cares about you and is in your corner, I cannot stress enough. So I guess what I'm forgetting to mention, and really is the most important thing, is during my first 2 years of medical school, first we had my son, Isaac, who right now is 6, and then we got married in, oh man, my wife would kill me if I had to stop and think about this, July of 2011. During my PhD, we had my daughter, Olivia, who's 4 right now and is just as much of a princess as this picture shows, and we got our first dog, Rocky. So after I finished my PhD in June of 2015, I went back into medical school. That's how an MD PhD program works. You do 2 years of medical school, you start and finish your PhD in 3 to 4 to 5 years, and then you go back and you finish up medical school. So that's where I am right now. I'm actually applying to residency in general surgery as we speak. Jonathan's up here. He has my phone. He's checking my email because I'm expecting interview invites right now. So if I'm a little bit nervous, it's not I'm nervous talking to you guys, it's nervous about what Jonathan's going to tell me. And we also got our second dog, Lady, that's a German Shepherd. And so with that being said, we're going to start residency in general surgery in June of 2017 and do that for the rest of my life. So as far as disclosures, unfortunately, I can't tell you I work for Merck or something and make millions of dollars a year. But my disclosure would be that during this talk, you may think that it sounds like I'm unfairly being biased towards the MD PhD route. It's probably true. I have my reasons, it's subconscious. And I think it is a great pathway, and I hope to at least put the option in your ear. I didn't hear about an MD PhD option until my junior year here at Juniata. Had I not been doing research before that, it would have been too late. I would have had to do a gap year or 2. If you're going to do an MD PhD, or you think it could at least be an option, you need to get serious starting at the end of your freshman year. I cannot stress the importance of that enough. So with that being said, we'll just sort of get into the meat of the talk. So what I'm really talking about today is being a biomedical scientist. And someone just shout it out, what does being a biomedical scientist mean to you? Forgot your name. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh geez, put me on the spot.
I know.
I would say applying your research to the clinical side.
Good. Yeah, that's very good. That's very good. So what I want to hammer home is there are multiple ways to be a biomedical scientist. You can be a biomedical scientist as an MD, as a PhD, or as an MD PhD. So when we're talking about a biomedical scientist, it's important to just define some terms. So we define what they are. They conduct research, but that research is conducted in order to be applied directly to patients. It's not research that is important, but knowing to know type of research, or doing the research just to understand how something works. No, a biomedical scientist does research in order to advance human health. What degree do they have? Well, I already gave you the answer to this. They can have multiple degrees. The ones we're going to talk about today would be an MD, a PhD, and an MD PhD. Just shout it out. What words would describe the personality of a biomedical scientist? This is kind of cheesy, I know, but I think it's important. You got to have something. Jonathan?
Driven.
Driven?
Analytical.
Very good. One more. Who's got something? Come on, guys. You heard me say it's going to be interactive, right?
Curious.
Yeah. So driven or persistent, creative, curious. My parents actually called me the Terminator whenever I was a kid because I was persistent. If I wanted something, I would find a way to get it. No matter what I had to do, I would find, if I had to drive back or walk back to Grandma's because she'd get me whatever I wanted, that's what I would do. But they called me the Terminator. And so I think that that's a very important characteristic for someone who wants to be a biomedical scientist. They're going to do something, no matter how many people tell them it's a bad idea or how many people tell them it can't be done, they're going to find a way to accomplish their objectives. And where does a biomedical scientist work? This is this is where we get into the freedom of being a biomedical scientist. If you have one of these degrees, there are so many options for you, and that's why it's so exciting. You can work at an academic medical institution or a pharmaceutical company. Probably 90% of people that have one of these degrees work at a university or within pharmaceuticals. But you can also do other things, like work in a clinical lab for the FDA, testing new therapies or testing new products. You can work for the government, for the NIH, reviewing people's science and deciding who to fund. You can work for mass communications. Think of Sanjay Gupta on CNN, right? Law firms, consulting firms are always trying to hire people with this expertise. So I think when you think of a biomedical scientist, you think of getting one of these advanced degrees, you sort of need to open up what you're thinking of and consider different options. So as I said, there are multiple pathways to getting there. We're going to talk about each of the 3 of these pathways, and we're going to start with the MD. So I was thinking back, and I know Dr. KG used to do a great job on talking about a lot of this stuff, and I'm 100% certain Dr. Siglin does as well. So I was trying to think about stuff. What did I not know graduating as a senior from Juniata that I wish I would have known? And I tried to focus the talk on that, because I know Dr. Siglin's telling you need to shadow. I know she's telling you need to volunteer. But what are other things, the more subtle things or the more non-quantifiable things that we could talk about that would be important? And that's what we're going to try to focus on. One of the things I want you to be thinking about as I'm talking about these different characteristics of a biomedical scientist is this right for me? Do these characteristics, do these interests and these passions describe me? And which of my passions and interests sort of make me a candidate for one of these different options? So a little introspection. So we're going to start by talking about an MD. There's around 140 medical schools in the United States. Regardless of which one you graduate from, you still are a doctor, you still take care of patients. But everyone has goals as far as where they want to fit into a different program. Harvard is obviously like the quintessential top of the rung. UAB, I would say, is a middle of the rung program as far as like national prestige. You need to figure out where you want to go, because that largely dictates how hard you need to work while you're at Juniata. If you want to go to Harvard, you need to bust your ass for 4 years. I would argue that no matter where you want to go, you need to work hard for 4 years. But identifying what your goal is early, I think, is important. One of the things that I thought about was I wanted to do medical school, and I really worked hard to get into medical school, but I didn't honestly even know really what it was. Once I got there, what would I be doing? So this is a slide talking about time to career for medical school. So those 4 years you're in medical school, what do? Does anyone know? You told me, you said about the boards last night. I was impressed that you knew about step 1 and step 2. I didn't know about that. I thought I took the MCAT and was done. Whenever I got to medical school and they were like, oh yeah, you got to take this huge board exam after your second year, I was like, you're kidding me. So you guys know more than I did. What do you know?
The first 2 years are primarily coursework, and then the second 2 is clinical clerkships and
Right.
rotations.
So in general, that's what you do. You spend the first 2 years, during the first 2 years, you have summer breaks. Most people will do research during those first 2 years. That's the other thing that's another point that I want to hammer home. I think a lot of you, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I think a lot of you in the crowd, I know a lot of my colleagues at Juniata thought, I'm doing an MD. What do I care about research? I don't. You need to change that. That isn't how you should be thinking. If you want to get into one of the top 70 programs in the country, you need to have research on your application. All top medical schools now require you to do research while you're in medical school. At UAB, they call it scholarly activity. You do a minimum of 2 months of research during your 4 years there, but most people that are going into competitive residencies do research the entire time they're in medical school to some degree. Most of it is clinical research, so it's not quite as time-consuming, but research is important if you want an MD. And if you want to be a dermatologist or an orthopedic surgeon, you're going to do research. If you really don't want to do research, you might want to realign your career aspirations there. After your first years of medical school, which are preliminarily spent in the classroom, then you'll take step 1, and most of your education will move from the classroom into the clinic. You'll rotate through a bunch of different specialties within medicine. So you'll do a rotation in internal medicine, surgery, OBGYN, pediatrics, neurology, psychology, or psychiatry. That will be your third year of medical school. During your fourth year of medical school, you'll take classes that are called acting internships. A first-year resident is known as an intern. So your fourth year is meant to prepare you to be an intern. So by your third year of medical school, you should have decided, I want to be a surgeon. I want to be an internal medicine doc. And so during your fourth year, you take specialty classes. If you've decided you want to be an internal medicine doc, you'll probably take an acting internship in cardiology, one in nephrology. This way you can interact with internal medicine doctors, understand what you're going to do as an intern, and get ready to get letters of recommendation for residency. Residency itself lasts 3 to 6, but really 9 years. 7 or 8. A lot of surgical residencies last up to 8 years, but plan on 3 to 6 there. Some of them have research integrated in, depending on what type of residency it is. If you want to be a radiation oncologist, you're going to do research during residency for the most part. If you want to be a general surgeon, I bet a lot of you didn't know this, but all of the top general surgery residency programs almost universally require that you do 2 years of research. So you're going to do 2 years of research and 5 years of clinical training for a 7-year residency. And then you're going to do fellowship depending on what specialty you pick. So if you decide you're going to be an internal medicine doctor, you're going to do 3 years of an internal medicine residency, and then you're going to do a fellowship that's between 1 and 3 years. If you decide to do cardiology, you're going to do a 3-year fellowship. If you want to do infectious disease, you're going to do a 1-year fellowship. And a lot of those, if they're at a top academic medical center, you're going to do research 1 year during that fellowship. So that's why I'm trying to stress the importance of research here. And again, I disclosed at the beginning of this, I'm somewhat biased. So I think it's important to understand what you can do with an MD. So I think everyone knows you can treat patients, right? That's primarily why you go to get an MD. But what else can you do with an MD? And what else is entailed in treating patients? And this was stuff I didn't know as a junior or senior at Juniata College. So you can treat patients, but where do you treat them? Do you treat them in your office, in your hometown? Or do you treat them at a big academic medical center like Pitt? So basically, are you an academic physician at Pitt, or are you a private practice physician? Do you have your own patients that come and they see you, or do you see patients in the hospital? So hospitalist is a growing profession, meaning you don't have your own patients. You see patients that are in the hospital for whatever reason, and while they're in the hospital, you take care of them. When they leave the hospital, they go back to their primary care doctor. 40 years ago, primary care doctors saw you. You saw them as an outpatient. You went to their clinic, got your checkups once every 3 months. And then if you went to the hospital because you had a perforated appendicitis, while you were in the hospital, they came and provided your inpatient care. That has changed. And in today's landscape, inpatient care is done by a hospitalist. Your primary care physician may call in and say, hey, my patient came in with an appendicitis, how's he doing? But they're not going to come see you in the hospital. And that opens up these positions of hospitalists. Versus you can be a specialist. So basically, you don't have any patients that you see for primary care, but you see patients that have cancer. So they come to you and follow up with you. If they come in the hospital, you see them while they're in the hospital. But what else can you do with an MD? So I didn't know this, but at an academic medical center, 60% of the physicians there that see patients also have research. So that research can be, they run their own lab and they do experiments on mice or human samples. That could be clinical research that they do basically mining patient charts and figuring out outcomes, epidemiological type of research. But if you're going to work in an academic medical center, you're probably going to do research. In addition, at an academic medical center in particular, you're going to do teaching because academic medical centers train residents. And residents are trained by working with the attendings or the boss physicians at the academic medical centers. In private practice, you'll most likely do a lot less teaching, if any. But you can also do things like start your own company and be a leader in business. You can do public health research or be a public health advocate working with agencies like the CDC to put out policies and guidelines. There's a fair number of physicians, and there should be more, within politics. The Affordable Care Act obviously is at the front of everyone's mind, and physicians were involved in creating that law as well as advocating for it. And then journalism, again, think of Dr. Gupta at CNN. But I want to be an academic physician. I never foresee myself owning my own practice. I foresee myself always working at an academic medical center like Pitt. I foresee myself as a specialist, basically having a niche, treating patients with a specific set of complications. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time on academic medicine and what it is, and I think I've already covered this. Academic physicians basically consider their career as a three-legged stool. So the three legs of that stool are these things that you see right here: patient care, research, and teaching. So all physicians in an academic medical center are trying to get tenure. And to get tenure at an academic medical center, you have to be involved in at least two of these three things. So you have to obviously see patients, but then have some kind of research commitment, or be involved in teaching. So you're educating medical students, you're educating residents. So interestingly, as far as research goes, as far as research funding goes, so only 5% of hospitals are major teaching hospitals, which is the same thing as an academic medical center. So if you take every hospital in the United States, only 5% of them are major academic medical centers. But over 50% of the funding for extramural research through the NIH goes to these 5% of hospitals. So now you can sort of get an idea and see how heavily academic medical centers, places like where you're going to go to medical school, are engaged in research, and see why it's so important. In addition, academic medical centers are tertiary care centers. Do you guys know what that means? So that means, J.C. Blair is sort of a small community hospital, mostly staffed by private practice physicians. If you roll into J.C. Blair and need your gallbladder out, you're going to get that done at J.C. Blair. They're not going to say, "Oh, man, you need to go to Pitt." But if you roll into J.C. Blair with a complex pancreatic cancer, they're going to get a CT scan and say, "We see one of these a year. We don't do this here." They're going to send you to Pitt. Pitt's a tertiary care center, basically a referral center. So the sickest of the sick patients with the most complex problems go to these tertiary care centers. So during medical school at UAB, I've seen more Whipple procedures, which are complex 9-hour pancreatic resections, than I have cholecystectomies, meaning gallbladder removals. The surgeon who's operating at J.C. Blair today is going to do today more gallbladder removals than I've seen in my entire medical career. So at an academic medical center, at a tertiary care center, what you see, the problems that you see, are definitely skewed towards the more complex, rare conditions. Whereas at the private practice hospitals, that's where they're doing bread and butter cases like appendectomies, gallbladder surgery. So you need to decide that. Do you want to have a high volume practice where you're kicking out 10 gallbladders in a day? Or do you want to have a practice where you're doing one surgery a day, but that surgery is only done by 10 people on the face of the earth and it takes 12 hours? So these are the kind of things you have to decide about yourself to sort of try to figure out your career trajectory. The other thing is, and this is sort of trivial, but academic medical centers are almost always located in large cities. So you have to decide, do you want to live in a large city? So this is the stuff that I think you guys have most likely seen before. What does a good MD applicant look like? Now, again, I can't be telling you this for the first time, unless you're a freshman, then maybe I am. So the important thing here is I'm going to go through it quick. I want you guys to ask questions, okay? So you know this. Grades and your MCAT scores are important on getting into a good medical school or getting into a medical school at all. Your science, technology, math, engineering grades are more important than your, what was like a crazy liberal arts class I took while I was here, like science fiction literature or something. I got like an A- in that. I was so mad. They don't care. But they do care what you got in biology 1 and 2, right? That's important. OChem. No one likes OChem, but they care what you got. So work hard in those classes. They care about volunteering. You see this all the time. I help evaluate applications at UAB, and we have that person who has 37 volunteer experience listed, and they don't list how long they volunteered. What does that tell you? They did like once for like half an hour. No one cares. If you can say that you are a big brother or a big sister and you mentored 1 or 2 kids over the course of 3 years, and you did all that, and you can tell a story about what you did. Oh yeah, this kid came from this background, blah, blah, blah. We went out and we did this. I think it changed, the way that they viewed their life. That is what people remember about you. So don't worry. You don't need to volunteer for everything. Pick something that you're passionate about, volunteer for it, and do it during the course of your undergrad education. And that's what's going to be important. That's what you can put in your personal statement. That's what you can talk about when an interviewer at medical school asks you a question about your volunteer experience, because they will. Leadership versus involvement. I already sort of talked about this. Same thing. We all know those people that are involved in everything. They do a lot, but don't do very much with any of it. Be a leader. That's what they want to know. Medical schools are trying to train leaders, people that are going to change clinical practice. So if you can have 1 or 2 extracurricular involvements, but you've done that over the course of 2 or 3 years, you started as a member, then you were the secretary, now you're the president, that's impressive. That's what they're looking for. Shadowing, I don't think there's any question about that. The more the better. I think it's important to be able to say, I've done a lot of shadowing, I've done surgery, I've done medicine, I've done pathology, I've done neurology, a couple 10, 20 hours in each, but then I shadowed this guy or this girl, and I shadowed them every Friday for 3 years, and they want me to date their daughter, and they wrote me a really awesome letter. He actually put that in the letter of recommendation for me. That's important. People ask me about that on interviews. So establish a long-term relationship there. Letters, research with currency. People that are going to evaluate your application, everyone is going to have research on there. They're very good at determining what is real research and what you just have as a bullet point on there. If you did a semester, 1 hour a week in Dr. Keeney's lab, they're going to ask you a question about it during your interview, and you're going to look like an idiot. So if you're going to do research, if that's important to you, what you need to be focused on is gaining currency from that research. And what is currency? Publications. That's currency in science. I've heard people say if you don't publish it, it doesn't really even matter that you did it. I don't think that that's true at the level of an undergrad. It's certainly true at the level of a graduate student. But for an undergrad, you don't necessarily have to have a publication. That's tough to do in 4 years. But you should have presented that research at a meeting. You should be able to say, I did this research and I presented it to my peers. It was peer reviewed, and here's the abstract. So think about that when you do your research with that mentor. If that mentor doesn't say to you, hey, let's present, this is cool stuff, let's present this at this upcoming meeting, you need to talk to them and say, hey, I did this research, I'm pretty excited about it, I think I did a good job, and there's this conference coming up, and I think it would be good to go. Here are the dates for it. I'm going to submit my abstract for a poster presentation. And you need to be proactive in your own education and gaining that opportunity for yourself. And then letters of recommendation, who are those from? This is always like a clout versus time spent. So do you want to get one from the highest named person at your institution because it's a big name, or do you want to get it from maybe like a mid-level professor who knows you well and who can speak to your personal qualities? That's up to you. I think a mix of both is important, but probably applying for medical school, it's important to pick someone who knows you well. So make sure that you're identifying mentors that can get to know you and who can speak to why a medical school should want you. Oops, I skipped that last one, huh? Then the non-quantifiables. These are things that come out on interviews. Everyone talks about like interviews and, you want to come off this way. Just come off as a human. That's all you have to do. And people think that that's like a weird way to put it, but just come off as a normal person, a person that they would like to spend time with, go get a beer with. That's really what they're looking for. This has actually been studied. And on interviews, if they've invited you for an interview, they're happy with your grades. They're happy with your background. They just want to make sure you're not a weirdo. That's why you're at the interview. So act like a human. So, that's sort of the brash way to put it, but it's true. Good mentorship, I'm going to say that 100 times because it's just so important. If you come away with nothing from this talk other than you need to, every single one of you, if if I come back next year and I look at you and say, who's your mentor? You better be able to spit it out immediately. You need to find a mentor, someone who's going to be in your corner, someone who can speak for you, someone who can guide your career trajectory. You guys can't do that on your own. Doesn't matter how much of a rock star you are. You're too, I'm too lower level to be able to have the foresight to see where my career is going and guide its trajectory. You need help on that. So everyone, today, start looking for a mentor if you don't already have one. And I don't mean someone you meet with once a semester. Hardworking, everyone wants someone who's hardworking, and they're going to ask you on interviews, what do you want to do? Where do you see your career going in 5 or 10 years? Every one of you will get that question. That doesn't mean you need to say, I want to work at Penn State Hershey Medical Center as a gastroenterologist and spend half my day doing research and half my day. That's not what they, well, if you give that, and that's true, that's fine. But they just want to know that you've thought about your future, thought about what's going on long term, and you have insight into this. So we're not going to spend much time on this, but the other thing, so none of this matters if you're going to do an MD, PhD. It's free and they pay you, but we'll get around to that. But you need to start saving money now, unless you have a donor. I didn't have a donor. My parents, my mom's a waitress. My dad never graduated college, so this would have came out of my bank account. If that's true for you, you need to start saving. Primary application fees, they're expensive. Secondary application fees are expensive. You're going to travel to interviews. I'm doing that right now. It's expensive. I've set aside $12,000 for that. This really, it's such a large amount of money, there's no point in saving for it now, but that's what you're up against. $300,000 to go to medical school. Look for scholarships, private versus public, you know, talking about a pretty big chunk of change. So that's a lot of debt to come out of school with. And when you start, that's not a lot of salary to pay that amount of debt with. So residents don't get paid much. If you actually factor how much you'll work and divide it out, you'll make worse than minimum wage. And then the median starting salary for an internal medicine physician, this is a non-fellowship trained physician, is $180,000. So it's still actually, with interest, quite difficult to pay these back on that type of salary. So, I mean, if you come out as a cardiologist, it's going to be significantly more, $300,000. But I think it's important to know what it looks like. So that's sort of what I had to say about the MD route. Does anyone have any questions on that? None? I was that clear or that boring and you just weren't paying attention? Okay. Well, if they come up, bring them up, okay? So I think that this is important because whenever I came into medical school, I never would have considered doing a PhD. I didn't even know what it was. So I had no intentions of doing a PhD. And really just by luck, by running into Dr. Bennett, is really what inspired me to want to do a PhD. So I hope I have no intentions of inspiring everyone in this room to do an MD, PhD. It's not right for everyone in this room. So really my goal is to put into your head what a PhD is, what the benefits of having a PhD are, so that you don't just say, I didn't like biology 2 lab, research is stupid, I'm never going to do it. I want, after you hear my talk today, everyone to come out of the room with not that opinion, okay? That's the goal here. So why do a PhD? One great reason is travel. So again, this goes back to having good mentors who didn't hide their wallet from me. But during my PhD, I got to go to Edinburgh, Scotland. I got to go with my wife to Honolulu, Hawaii. I snorkeled the Great Barrier Reef. These are all because I went to meetings. So I went to meetings held in these locations. While I was in Hawaii, don't tell anyone this. I think this is being recorded, so maybe I shouldn't say it, but I think I spent like 10 minutes at the meeting. And then most of my time like surfing and going to a luau. We went and met with John McCain at the Capitol, advocating for research money. We spent a lot of time. I've been to Chicago 4 times for an APSA meeting, the American Physician Scientists Association. So it's fun. I got to go to all these places basically for free. Why else? A PhD is relatively flexible. Dr. Seglin might disagree with me on this. I'm not saying you're not going to work a lot. You're going to work an average of 60 hours a week, but it's your time. Your mice don't care if you go in at noon and then work till midnight. I didn't. I have a family. I wanted to be home whenever my family got home. So I worked from 5 a.m. to 4 p.m. and it worked out perfectly for me. I was off at work starting and had experiments starting before my kids were awake. And I was home when they got home. During my PhD, there were very few nights that I didn't eat supper with my family. So you have personal and professional flexibility, which I think is absolutely outstanding. I use the time to start a family. So curiosity. If you're one of those people that look at something, doesn't matter if it's a car, doesn't matter if it's when a person's cut open on the operating table in front of you, and you say, how does that work? PhD is a good option for you. You can figure that out. Money, I'll show you a slide in a little bit. PhDs get paid fairly well. Not as well as physicians, depending on what they're doing, but they get paid pretty well. And then if you're at all interested in getting an MD, obviously, again, I disclosed it at the beginning. I'm a little bit biased towards the physician-scientist route. And I had a ball during my PhD. I can't remember a time, and this is me. A lot of people hate their PhD. They have bad mentors or they didn't know what they were getting into, but I absolutely loved it. I looked forward to going to work. I worked a lot of weekends when other stuff was going on, and I didn't have to. I wanted to be there. So I think it is a lot of fun. So now that I've told you why you should get a PhD, how do you, and what is one? So I remembered this cartoon. I thought it was just great. My cousin graduated from Juniata College, and then she went to Iowa and got a PhD. And I remember, I said I didn't even know what it was. And my dad was the one who told me what it was. And I said, Dad, what is Greta doing? And he said, I don't know. She's some kind of professional student. So that was my idea of what a PhD was going into college. And then I saw this cartoon, and it said, it's Bart. He's holding up like a long hair behind him here, and he says, look at me, I'm a grad student, I'm 30 years old, and I made $600 last year. And then Marge says, Bart, don't make fun of graduate students, they just made a terrible life choice. So I think that, that might be what a lot of people think about grad school, and I think it is really funny, but really not true. So what is a PhD? So if this circle represents the entirety of human knowledge, after you get through elementary school and high school, this is sort of where you are. You know some, but not very much. Once you go into get a bachelor's degree, you learn more, and then you learn more about a particular area. That's that like little nipple there. You guys are biology majors, so you know a little bit about biology. No one gets a master's anymore, but if you did, you'd learn a little bit more about biology. Once you start getting out into your PhD, this is what you're doing. You're not learning more globally, you're learning more about a very specific thing. So most people have a very specific topic. They can describe what they spent 4 years studying in one sentence. I studied the mechanisms of heme oxygenase-mediated protection against tissue injury. That was what I spent 4 years studying. And so that's sort of what a PhD is. You're zooming in. But here's the cool part. You're expanding the circle of what human knowledge is. So what you guys are learning now, people already know because research exists. You're just learning it because you need to start somewhere. When you get a PhD, you're doing something yourself and finding out something for the first time. If that makes you excited, then you really need to think heavily about research. If it doesn't, then maybe it's not for you. And this is why PhDs get a bad name, because they take what they've learned and they see it, they fail to see the whole picture, which is this. This is where the PhD is, as far as the whole picture goes. So I think that's where a physician-scientist really excels, because they can't do this. They have to do this, because their medical training and the patients that they see force them to see the big picture. So this is sort of that just displayed graphically. I'm sorry I couldn't get the text to look real nice, but basically this is a graph of what you know on the y-axis versus how much you know about it. So here you guys are. You know a little bit about a lot. You're taking biology, you're taking chemistry, you're taking biochemistry. You guys are liberal arts people, so you know a little bit about science fiction literature. As you no one gets a master's degree. When you get a PhD, you're knowing a lot about something very specific. So this is sort of the trajectory of your knowledge as you go through your PhD. This isn't important. When people say, oh, why, this is what, people say, I didn't get a PhD because of this. This isn't important. This is really what you learn. You learn how to ask a question. You learn how to develop a hypothesis. You learn to know if it's a good question, because you can read the literature and decide, is this important to human health? With this knowledge, I change the natural history of a disease? You learn how to find the answer. You learn how to do experiments. You learn how to do a Western blot. You learn how to do flow cytometry, which we'll talk about tonight. Once you get that answer, you learn to critically evaluate it. Does it matter? Is it a good answer? Does it apply to anything? You learn how to share your answers with others. You learn how to write manuscripts, publish manuscripts. You learn how to work for 4 years on a manuscript, turn it in, and then have someone email you and say, your work sucks. And you learn how to respond to that. And I think anyone who's had a PhD understands that happens. And then most importantly, unfortunately, is you learn how to write and express your ideas in a way that will convince someone sitting in Washington, D.C. to pay for all of the above. So you learn how to get grants. Now, regardless of what you're studying, whether it's microbiology, immunology, whatever, these questions and learning these things will serve you well in your career as a physician and just in your life as a human. So you learn really important tasks by training as a PhD, and that's what I want you to remember. So the bottom line is a PhD is what you make it. I just spent 5 minutes telling you that you study very narrow things during your PhD. That's not always true. For me, I had one project, so I'm Travis Hall, I had one project studying acute injury in the heart and inflammation in cardiac injury. The next year I published a paper studying the role of myeloid cell inflammation in acute kidney injury, so two different organ systems. Then the next year I went back to the heart, but instead of studying inflammation, I was studying the mitochondria and how they regulate the development of dilated cardiomyopathy. So my PhD wasn't that narrow, it was fairly broad. So a PhD is what you make it, the important points, and the factors that really decide the trajectory and therefore the success of your PhD. And this is relevant for medical school too. Mentors, really important. Your career goals, what are you working towards? And being open to the fact that these will change. If your career goals aren't changing, you're not learning. Your personality and your drive. What are your goals? Do you want to be a private practice physician, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with, those are great people? Or does your personality entail curiosity and you want to do research? You want to be that one surgeon in the world who does this operation at this one institution and people from all over the world fly to see you. Serendipity is very important. Just random luck, things that come up, and how you sort of get around that adversity. Do you take that adversity and make it work for you, or does it put you in a hole crying? And then luck or lack thereof. So what isn't a PhD? And everyone that I graduated Juniata that hated research said this. Oh, I hate research. Why do you hate research? Oh, I hate a biology lab. That's not research. Biology lab is not research. It's great, and you need to do it because they teach you that stuff that everyone hates, like how to keep a good notebook. That doesn't change. Even during your PhD, you hate keeping a good notebook, but you don't have to. But still, you need to learn it. So this is not a reason to not give research a try. Saying, took biology 2 lab, boy, that sucked. I really didn't enjoy that. Every time I forgot to include that one little phrase in my lab notebook, Dr. Siglin just marked off points and I did really bad, so I'm, heck with research. No, that's not how it works. PhD, how do you get one? You're going to go to an academic medical center or university. An average time for a PhD is 5 to 6 years. At the front end, you're going to do coursework and then you're going to rotate through different labs. Eventually, from one of those rotations, you're going to pick a thesis mentor whose lab you're going to join. Once you join that lab, you're going to do a little bit of research to find where your research project is going to take you, and then you're going to sit in front of a committee that's going to try for an hour to ruin your life and make you feel really, really dumb. And you're going to defend why you're going to spend the next 4 years doing that research. And then you're going to spend the last couple years doing that research, getting some publishable results, writing up those results as a publication, submitting them for publication, and then defending your thesis. Does that all make sense? And then after that, most people go on to do a postdoctoral fellowship. They'll do, usually one of those takes 3 years. A lot of people now, because it's so competitive, do 2. And then they go on and start their career. This is sort of the same thing. What can you do with a PhD? A lot. Obviously, you're going to, yes? 10 minutes. Okay. Obviously, you're going to do research, right? So you can do that at an academic medical center, or you can do it at like the Scripps Institute, which is a private institute. But you can also teach, be a public health person, or do journalism and do some writing. So there's a lot of different options. We're going to skip this in the interest of time because a lot of the things that you need to do to be a good applicant to a PhD program are the same. The one thing that's different is you need to take the GRE. Just like all standardized tests, it sort of stinks. PhDs are free as far as applying to them, so that's different than medical school. Your tuition and fees are free in an MD or in a PhD program, and most of the time they pay you. It's a modest salary, usually less than 30 grand a year, but I'm sort of living proof that you can own a house and have 2 kids and a wife with that salary, if your wife works. And then salary. So at all the different steps along the PhD ladder, which most people climb this, what could you be expected to be paid? I don't really want to get too much into the gender gap. I think they did that last night on CNN. But in the 140s to 150s is what you can expect to make as a PhD. So now we come to sort of my bread and butter, putting these things together. And I didn't do a good job on sort of saving myself time to go into this stuff, so we're sort of going to gloss over some of the details of it. But an MD PhD is really someone who takes the MD and the PhD and they put it together into one salient career trajectory. They treat patients, and generally the patients that they treat have the types of diseases that they study in the lab. So not only are they treating patients, but they're advancing the treatment of those patients by what they find in the lab. And if you're excited by that, then you need to give an MD PhD serious thought. So basically they're chimeras. They work at the intersection of science and medicine. They fill this space. So what do you know about an MD PhD? So if I was sitting in your seat as a sophomore, I would have known the answer to none of these questions. You want to do an MD PhD here at Juniata. Who do you go to talk to about that? We're not going to answer these questions. But if you don't know the answer to these questions, you need to find out the answer to them like tomorrow, today maybe. When should you start serious research? By the end of your freshman year, by the beginning of your sophomore year, you need to start serious research if you're going to do an MD PhD. The average length is 8 years. The cost is free. If you're at a good MD PhD program, they pay for your tuition and they pay you. And then what is the difference between how they evaluate an MD and an MD PhD? And the short answer to that is research. If you're going to be an MD, they expect you to have research. If you're going to be an MD PhD, they expect you to have serious research with currency. So these are some of the questions that you can ask yourself to determine if an MD PhD is right for you. Do you like reading about science, or do you like doing science and applying it to your patients? Do you like seeing patients, or do you like seeing patients and doing research? Do you want to work in a private community practice, or do you want to work in an academic medical center? So the other point that I want to make is there are MD PhD programs and there are MSTPs. There are 43 MSTPs where you see these dots. MSTP stands for Medical Scientist Training Program. Sorry guys, I'm running over here, but if you're going to go for an MD PhD, you certainly want to try to get into an MD PhD program that is designated as an MSTP, meaning they're funded by the federal government, by the NIH. These programs are organized better, they're more prestigious programs, and you have a better chance of being successful if you come out of an MSTP-funded MD PhD program as opposed to just a regular MD PhD program. This is what the schedule looks like. Basically, during your first 2 years of medical school, in the summer between, you'll do research rotations to pick your PhD mentor. You'll also take graduate school classes at the same time taking your MD classes. This is really nerve-wracking, right? You have all of your colleagues complaining about how hard medical school is, and you're saying, yeah, and I'm doing medical school plus taking all of these graduate school classes. It's tough, but you get through it. Then you take 4 years out to do your research. You take some graduate school classes during that time. You finish your research, defend your thesis, you publish a few manuscripts, and you go back to medical school and finish your 3rd year, then your 4th year, and then you go into residency just like anyone else. So we're going to skip this. As far as this, the only thing I'll mention about this paper is we need more physician scientists. If you're worried about career security, if you're worrying about there being an opening for you, an MD PhD is a really good place. A lot of people call physician scientists a dying breed. My MD PhD director, Robin Lorenz at UAB, actually wrote a paper about it along with the MD PhD director at UPenn. There's copies of these papers that Jonathan has, and I would really encourage you and Dr. Siglin to pick one up on your way out. This is just showing you that most MD, PhD trainees end up working in an academic medical center, but the ones that really want to make like $3 million a year work at pharma or go and be a patent lawyer. So the big thing here is MD, PhD programs are really looking for leaders. They're looking for the HOSA president, the Tri-Beta president, not just the member. They're looking for people with meaningful research, meaning they've attended meetings, presented their abstracts, or they have papers. And there are some challenges to that coming from a liberal arts institution. Now, I tell everyone, I hope my kids go to Juniata. I wouldn't change going to Juniata for anything in the world. I think it's the best place on earth. But I did have some unique challenges getting it into an MD, PhD program from Juniata for these reasons. There's 1,600 liberal arts institutions across the country. I think Juniata is the best of the 1,600, and I would debate that with anyone who wanted to debate it. But when you put your application in to UPenn or to Pitt, they don't know that. So for example, when we would go to, I'm sorry, I know I'm running over time, but when we would go to conferences and present our research at conferences, we would present against people who were doing the project where they painted colors around different holes and saw which one the fish would swim into, orange or green. And we're presenting microbial genetics, genetic sequencing new genes, naming them and publishing them. Juniata is an outstanding institution, but the places you interview and apply don't know that unless you tell them. So how do you get around these challenges? I've told you this 5 or 6 times now. Start your research early, start and get a mentor. Be your own advocate, be mature, and understand what you're up against. So we're going to skip this, and this is my last slide. Make connections. I am happy to help you guys in any way that I can. I told Jonathan this last night. There are people that say, here's my email address, contact me anytime you want, and then you email them and never hear from them again. I'm not that person. If you email me and need some help, I am more than happy to give it to you. We might have to talk on the phone early in the morning or late at night after my kids go to bed, but we will talk on the phone. Oftentimes when people tell you they want to help you, you're afraid to get in contact with them. Oh, they're too busy. If you call me and I'm too busy, I won't answer. I'll call you back. So if you need help, let me know. There are other people though. MD, PhD directors are such great resources because they know about MD, they know about PhD, and they know about them both. There is not an MD, PhD director in the country that you couldn't cold email with a question that wouldn't answer it for you. I think a great place to start is Robin Lorenz, and here's her information. You can get it if you just Google her name. But then there are additional resources. You can look at some of the different blogs that the MD, PhD students publish. Ours is called Unabridged. The AAMC has really great resources, and then the American Physician Scientists Association will just request that you guys all go home and Google that and check it out. I'm one of the 5 leaders in that program. It's an awesome program, and I hope you guys will give it a look. So with that being said, I'm done. I know I'm out of time. I don't know if we have time for questions, but you know how to reach me, and I'll be around tonight.